I think it's a really important thing to have a little bit of self-imposed suffering in life, no matter how great things get financially or whatever the case may be. I think it's just helpful to a person just to have something that they're doing, that they're kind of putting themselves through, that's going to be some level of hardship to gain some greater result.
A person that doesn't have some self-imposed suffering is going to have a lot of other suffering. That
Sure.
If you're not willing to put yourself in tough situations and work your way out of it, so to speak, then you know the world's going to put you in plenty of tough situations.
Oh, yeah.
Today I'm chatting with Garry Tonon. Gary's a 5-time champion in grappling, won the Eddie Bravo Invitational. He's also a top contender at One Champion, which is like the UFC of Asia, if you don't know. And you have a hell of a resume over there. So you just fought for the title in your weight division.
I did.
What's that? What's the road like for young Garry to grow up and be winning some of the most prestigious grappling type tournaments in the world? Top contender, damn near won the title.
Yeah. Well, it was an interesting road for me because number one, when I was growing up, I really didn't have a heavy male influence in my life. So the idea of doing a combat sport was very much out of the question. My mom was very much not in support of doing anything like that. So it took some major convincing on her part for me to even do the sport of wrestling at first. So I worked my way through doing that, met some people that introduced me to jiu-jitsu. And then, certainly was never a thought in her mind that I would ever get punched in the face for money, that's for sure.
Most good mothers
probably not. I kind of understand that one. But yeah, jiu-jitsu was a very small niche sport, still is to some degree. But in terms of professionalism and making money and making a living off of doing it, it wasn't even something that was heard of at the time when I was doing jiu-jitsu. So I got to be a part of the era of jiu-jitsu that started to make people money, started to make it a professional sport, started to make it something that people could make a living off of. And then from there, I parlayed those skills into my ability to do mixed martial arts, and went on a quick title run. I tried to get to the title very quickly. 6 fights and was there. So it's much faster than most people would be working their way towards a major world title, especially having 0 striking experience prior to that, only grappling. Failed to do it the first time, but I'll be coming back again.
Well, you're still a young guy. You got a lot of time. You got a lot of time to get
sure.
that. I've had a chat with Glover Teixeira, and I think he's 41, 42. I'm 42 right now, and he's got his UFC belt in his 40s. So you're more than a decade younger, and you got a lot of early experience to keep that momentum.
For sure.
So my mother, she didn't want me. I was a little troublemaker, badass kid that. My dad was in prison, my uncle was in prison, and one of those type of families. And my mom wasn't the best mom, but she didn't want me to be involved in martial arts. It was something that I was curious about as a kid, that I think a lot of young boys are, and
sure,
makes sense why. And she didn't want me to go to boxing. She didn't want me to go to karate. She didn't want me to do anything. So she thought I'd be, I think erroneously, she thought I'd get myself into more trouble or have more violent altercations. And I think as you'd imagine, I think the truth is that. Probably would have been exactly the opposite of that, but I think she was well-intentioned, but she kept me away from that when I was young. So I started, very late in life, in my 40s, to, Jake Shields helps me with jiu-jitsu and general MMA things, and Paulie Malignaggi is my boxing coach.
Cool.
Paulie comes over about 3 days every 4 weeks, and we punch shit until everything's sore and swollen, and then Jake and I choke each other for another, 3 days every 4 weeks or so.
Not an experience anybody desires, and it's you have to be a masochist on some level to be a part of that, for sure.
I had a chat with Gordon Ryan about some of this sort of thing. We had a talk around the topic of fuck you money, and which I explained my perception of that. Fuck you money doesn't mean that somebody's got money and somebody else don't. So fuck the poor guy. But in my definition of that, or my way of thinking about that, is that if you should have enough money, you should earn enough money in your life, or in as early as possible, that you would only want to do business with people that fully appreciated you or fully respected you. And
sure,
if somebody treated you in a disrespectful way, you wouldn't do business with them because you needed the money. You'd
Absolutely.
be like, fuck that guy. And
you
just don't need the money that bad that you would tolerate something that's unfair.
Absolutely.
So my version, apparently, of fuck you money, that I grew up poor and I worked my ass off forever, and about the time I made enough money that I'm like, I don't have to work for money at all. I kind of could have quit about your age, and and I pushed through that longer. And I wanted to learn more about investments and how to multiply your net worth, and that happened, and it turned out very nicely. But now I'm in my 40s, and I have professional athletes come like choke me and punch me and contort me into peculiar positions, and you have to fight my way out of that. So it's a funny way to spend your you spent your life trying to create some financial abundance, and then you're spending some of that financial abundance to have fantastic coaches to come help me play a little catch up that my mom didn't want me to have when I was a kid.
For sure. I think it's a really important thing to have a little bit of self-imposed suffering in life. No matter how great things get financially or whatever the case may be, I think it's just helpful to a person just to have something that they're doing, that they're kind of putting themselves through, that's going to be some level of hardship to gain some greater result. Without that, it all starts to kind of not feel as meaningful, or you feel like something's missing. I don't know, for me at least, that's the way that I feel. I definitely feel, and you may get it from other areas as well. It doesn't always mean martial arts or physical things or whatever the case may be, but I definitely think that's a huge part of becoming successful on some level.
I love what you said, and what clicked in my head when you said that, maybe you'll agree with it or not, but a person that doesn't have some self-imposed suffering is going to have a lot of other suffering. That if you're always avoiding, if you're not willing to put yourself in tough situations and work your way out of it, so to speak, then the world's going to put you in plenty of tough situations. And if you haven't done that yourself and you had some level of preparedness to deal with psychological stressors, physical stressors, then you're kind of helpless to deal with some of the things that life is going to throw at you.
Absolutely.
I've looked at it, helped my confidence. I'm really curious about your thought about this, but some of that self-imposed suffering, it helped my confidence a lot. That I kind of did that since I was, before I was a teenager, at least age 10, I was coming to the realization my dad's not here, and my mom's not capable of doing much, and if I want to not live on welfare as an adult and not have this bullshit life as an adult, probably I'm going to have to figure some things out myself,
Sure.
And at that time, I didn't have very good role models or mentors. I had a lot of negative role models that you had examples of I'm not doing that shit.
Absolutely.
But
in some ways, that's a good thing too. But also, I was something, I forget exactly who I heard say that for the first time, but it really struck a chord with me, hearing that not only do you want to have a vision of what you want to do and what you're working towards, but it's also important to have a vision of what you definitely don't want to work towards, because otherwise sometimes you can get steered there without thinking about it.
There's an exercise that when I ask people to do that, they think it's insane, but the people that do it universally love it. There's an exercise that I have clients doing. I call it the 3 sacred questions. And that sounds a little grandiose, but I think it is actually a life-changing thing. And I ask them, I tell them, for those that are up to it, go lock yourself in a bathroom for 48 hours. And the point is not to be cruel to yourself, but bring a pillow, bring a mattress, bring as much food as you'd like to. And you have water there, you could take a shower, you have a toilet, but don't leave the damn room for 48 hours. And bring a notebook, bring a couple pens. And the 3, I have about a 70-page workbook that I have them go through. That those 3 basic questions are what kind of person am I? So what kind of man or woman are you? What kind of life do you want to live? And who would be the best companions for that life? And I tell them just sit there for 3 days and answer those clearly, and then in many contexts. And if you don't have that clarity about your own identity, I'm sure you do. But think about that if you're fumbling around in life and I don't know who I am. I don't know what I want. I'll just hang out with any random asshole. It's how would you get anything done?
Sure. Yeah, that sense of a vision for what you want, just so important. And I think that sometimes, people get caught up in the day-to-day. And sometimes even for myself, I find myself, although I do believe I've had a very clear vision from pretty early on, and thankfully I ran into some good role models along the way, which I'm sure at some point you did as well. Because at first I was few and far between. I'm looking around, who do we follow here? I follow the one guy and I was this isn't really working out. And eventually, I found some good ones. I think that in finally getting that vision, It just makes it a lot easier to do this stuff. But I often fill my day, to the brim. One thing after another, after another, and you never have, sometimes when you do that, you never have that time, like you just mentioned, to take 48 hours where you're thinking about yourself, that self-reflection time. And I think sometimes people do it, that it's not an intentional thing. I think you're hiding from yourself a little bit, because you don't want that quiet time. And I think something that was at least true for me is I would have a lot of like insomnia. I would have trouble sleeping and these sorts of things, because when everything stopped, when I finally, that busy day that I just filled to the brim, which is part of why I'm probably successful. But once that busy day stops, now all that self-reflection all of a sudden hits you when you're sitting in the quiet of things, right? So I think that time is super important, regardless of whether or not you have a vision, to just take some of that time for yourself, because there's a lot of self-reflection that a man, I think, has to do in his life. And I'm thankful to understand that a little bit more in older age. I think younger, I didn't see that as much of value.
I had a time in my life where that exercise was birthed in my head, where I was sitting in the county jail as a teenager, and I was sitting in county jail, and a violence-related thing where, long story short, a young man attacked me, and that didn't turn out well for either of us.
Okay.
I've told the story before, but when I was 16, I got stabbed in my shoulder over here, and that wasn't too much fun. And then I was 17, and a different young man was approaching me with a knife in his hand, and we were having some words previously. And I spent 90 days in the county jail, and I have no adult felonies because I was willing to stay there longer.
Sure.
They dropped one charge entirely. They dropped the second one to a misdemeanor, and I have no felonies. But but I was charged with two as a 17-year-old. But I was sitting around, even in jail, I seemingly couldn't behave myself, and you'd have other now that, in fairness, there's no cameras in the cell block, and you show up and you're 17 years old, and if you're not willing to have conflict with men, you're going to have some different type of problems. So, you can choose your miseries there, but it's in your best interest to be open-minded about fighting when you show up,
Sure.
So I've seen a couple of guys that had a different philosophy, and I didn't like where that led for them. And
sure.
I think they might have second-guessed it themselves afterwards. But
sure.
In any case, I remember set about in my cell for about 6 days, and which is basically a normal bathroom, like a bathroom in a middle-class house. And you had a lot of time to reflect, and I was just a teenager, but I thought that really helped me with some clarity, as bizarre as the story might, the lead-up might be, but it really did help me with some clarity of like, are you engaging in behaviors that are going to lead to the best possible outcomes, and how would I modify my current behaviors to have better outcomes? I had a good brain. I had a high IQ. I always had a good work ethic. If I focused on something, I was very delighted to show up and work and do what was necessary, and but I didn't have a lot of good guidance,
Yeah.
So that's, as you touched on, that's where things really changed for me. Is I think during that time I thought I had some rudimentary reflections about what kind of man am I? What kind of life do I want to live? Is this the right? Am I going down the right path right now? Who are the right people I'd like to spend time with and not spend time with? And I had plenty of examples in my immediate environment that it probably wasn't my best option in life to spend time with the people there.
Sure.
So that helped me have a bit of clarity of. You kind of need to know those things before you can set an appropriate goal.
Yeah.
And, I might say this repetitively, but, what kind of, for me personally, and women watch my stuff, and half of my followers on Instagram are women, and I have female clients too, but I'll just speak about myself personally. I thought, what kind of man am I? Which is not necessarily a noble question. It's like, it's not though. It should be an animalistic, it should be a bestial question of what sort of creature am I? What are my habits or proclivities or things that might be petty but bring me delight, or some of them might be noble and polite or whatnot. Some of them aren't. Some of them aren't. And I wouldn't trust a guy that doesn't have some dangerous, violent thoughts on occasion. Like, do you want to be friends with a guy that's like, I would never hurt anybody? I don't think he'd trust that person. I don't trust somebody like that.
Yeah.
In any case, I'd rather be around somebody that's very dangerous and we're polite and courteous to each other because we value our relationship and we wouldn't harm each other. But if someone tried to harm us, we might be very open-minded of responding to that appropriately.
Sure.
So in any case, I thought if you had clarity of those three things, what kind of life do I want to live? So meaning, do you want some nice luxuries in your life? Do you want to sit around on a couch and drink beer and do not much? I wanted to go travel around the world. I wanted to have nice things. I grew up with poor things. I wanted to have nice things when I was older,
Sure.
And, then briefly moving on to who would the right people be? You know, I wanted to be around other people that were smart. I wanted to be around people that had a good brain and a good work ethic, and we were doing something industrious or helping each other that, you know, is some sort of a win-win relationship, you know? I didn't want to be around people that were, you know, had lazy habits or drug habits or, you know, negative things that weren't going to lead to outcomes that either of us would admire, you know? And if you had clarity on that, when you have those busy days, which I'm sure you have many, and I do too, when you have those busy days, it's kind of like a northern star, if you will, or a guiding light of like, you can make decisions very quickly. You're like, no, that's not for me. Or like, you know, oh, that's interesting. Should I pay attention for a minute? Let me come back to that. That's important to come back to. Not right now, but let me look that up tonight when I get settled in tonight. Let me find out more about that and see if it's a path worth going down. But the default answer becomes no, that if it's incongruent with your values or your goals, it helps filter out a whole lot of noise.
It's very interesting you bring that up, because I've mentioned this a few times recently. A light bulb went off for me about something that happened to me. I shouldn't say happened to me, but just an event that I was a part of when I was younger. And in such the oddest place, sometimes you find these little bits of wisdom. It was ironically in a one of those like auditorium meetings that you have in school where they bring you in and there's some guy talks about something, whatever the case may be. In this case, it was you know, an anti-drug, you know, kind of thing, like trying to make sure that none of the kids did drugs, alcohol, whatever the case may be. And you know, a lot of times those sorts of things are kind of corny and don't really work and aren't really constructive. The way that they're done is just it's not realistic, and you know, it's kind of just I find it to be relatively ineffective. But some one thing stuck with me that the person said, and I don't remember exactly what the quote was, but the gist of it was, make the decision ahead of time. If this is something that's important to you, make the decision ahead of time whether or not you're going to drink, whether or not you're going to do drugs, whether or not you're going to do these sorts of things. Because if you wait till the moment that you're presented with that question and you're leaving it up in the air as to whether or not that's going to be something that you will or will not do, it's very easy to get pressured into doing something that perhaps maybe isn't in your best interest, because in that moment it's not, you're not thinking as clearly. But like you said, you know, when you take that time to kind of shut out all the noise and just think clearly and figure out what that central focus is well ahead of time, it makes it so much easier to make those decisions on a day-to-day basis. And that really stuck with me, and I think that that's something that I always try to do as often as possible when I feel as though there's very finite things in life that I know, like, yes, I want this, I don't want this. And like you said, sometimes there's some ambiguity, and you can leave that open, but there are some very clear things that you know you do and don't want to be involved in. It's very important.
People that know me well or spend a lot of time, I love everything you said, and I agree with it so fully that I don't have a further comment.
That's okay.
People that know me well, people frequently comment that, you know, oh, you're very decisive, or, you know, I like that, you know, you're comfortable making a decision on the spot. Yeah. I'm comfortable making a decision on the spot because I thought the shit through ahead of time, just like you said.
Sure.
I thought, you know, I know that, I mean, people pitch me business ideas, yes, I can't tell you the number, and I want nothing to do with most of them, you know?
Sure.
And it's just really easy for me to sort through that of, you know, like, you know, no, I can't, I'm not interested in that. Well, let me tell you more. I said, don't waste your time, and please don't waste mine either. So I'm not interested in that. But what about the new crypto jibber? I'm not interested in that. And, you know, there's a few things that I like to invest in, things that I'm very knowledgeable of. I like to build businesses, and I like to invest in businesses that I can understand how they work, like in detail.
Sure.
And, you know, and I've made quite a lot of money doing that, and I know I'm going to make a lot more money in my lifetime doing that, and I don't need to invest in every damn thing in the economy, you know?
Yeah.
There's people out there, there's two real mental illnesses about investment that some people think that, you know, if you want to have a diversification and invest in everything, well, just buy an index then, you know? you buy the S&P 500, and now you own 500 companies, and you're guaranteed perfectly average performance. You're going to have the exact average of what the economy does.
Sure.
All right. And then there's another group of people, they want to be whatever the new trendy thing is. So I don't really give a shit about the new trendy thing. Like, deep in my heart, I couldn't care less about the new trendy thing. That, like, I like to find things that, you know, they're kind of based in evolutionary psychology that have probably been working for longer than written history.
Sure.
And, you know, if humans have been engaging in particular behaviors for, you know, thousands of years of written history, and likely hundreds of thousands of years before that, Homo sapiens are around about 300,000 years. And, you know, mammals are around 350, 400 million years. So, you know, and we happen to be mammals. There's a lot of overlap of what a human does versus some other, you know, life-preserving things that other mammals do, you know?
For sure.
So if you
Some
can look
people
at,
forget that a little too often, I think.
I think a lot of people do. I think they were birthed from an egg or birthed from a parent's ass or something. Whatever it wasn't good. So I try to find things like that. You know, in the 08-09 recession, a lot of people, you know, real estate fell off a cliff, and you could buy land for 15 cents on the dollar, premium land, premium high quality properties for not houses but residential land, 15 cents on the dollar of what it was selling for.
Yeah.
And I think to myself, well, the land is this cheap right now because people aren't going to, you know, you could buy a house for 60 cents on the dollar of what it costs to build. But, you know, so the economy has to catch up with that. And I don't know if it's 18 months or 36 months for the market to clear that it goes back to the, you know, the cost of building a home as you might rather build a home than buy a pre-existing one because the market is back at parity there. And that has to happen before the people want to, you know, buy that land and build lots on it. But in less than, 30 months on average. Some things I was selling in 17 months. Some things I had 4 years or so. 30 months on average, I was selling this stuff for 4x what I paid for it. And I bought a lot of it with, you'd make a deposit and have an amortization schedule. So my cash on cash returns were, 1,100%, 11x what I was paying for the cash that I had invested versus the cash coming out. And I mean, that's not ultra complex. It's something that, you don't have to be an ultra genius to see this.
Sure.
But people don't want that time risk, They believe the media headline about whatever hysteria or whatever the trend is at the moment, and they think those trends are permanent. And it's interesting to see, those misjudgments of human perception where, the media is your best friend in some of these. The great thing that the media does in business is if you look at market cycles, stock market or housing cycles, when things are going good, they say, all-time high. New all-time high. Can it get any better? Can it get any better? And there's an enthusiasm that, as if things just get to multiply in perpetuity.
Yeah, forever.
And that's a great time to be selling something, when there's a irrational exuberance to, quote our previous Fed chairman, when there's that sort of irrationality about prices, that the prices are disconnected from mathematical reality and they're kind of too good to be true. I like selling things when they're hyped up.
Sure.
And I also like buying things when they're, when they're talking gloom and doom and it's the end of the world. Well, if it's the end of the world, then my dollar's not worth anything anyway.
Sure.
And if I'm right about some of the assets that I think are underpriced, then I have to get paid, 5x or 10x. I don't know if it's going to be 2 years or 5 years, but humans kind of tend to repeat the same patterns over time, I don't like the new trendy thing. Imagine inventing your own martial art instead of finding something that's been, practiced by masters and champions, throughout decades, throughout centuries. Imagine, why don't you just invent it yourself instead of doing shit that was working really good?
Exactly. Yeah. A lot of people, they try to take ownership over things that were well developed, prior in our sport sometimes, which is kind of funny. Even just the origins of our sport sometimes people get a little confused because basically a large portion of what we do is well written in texts from judo from 1,000 years ago or something like that. Some people like to believe the history is a lot shorter than that, and it's like everything came from Brazil and like all these sorts of things. And it's like, this sport's been around for quite some time, and not just in the context of judo. Like, there's American wrestling and all these different things that have gone on far before. We were doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu and submission grappling and all of these things. But yeah, absolutely, I would agree with you that trying to completely reinvent the wheel when it comes to these sorts of things seems a little bit silly. I think there's a place for innovation for sure, which I'm sure on some level you've done yourself. And I think that anybody that's highly successful at anything that they do, probably has to be some level of innovation. You have to bring something new to the table. But yeah, everything that we do is operating off of pre-existing principles that got people success. A big part of what we do is research, hey, this particular move, what's the percentage of success that this move has in high-level competition, and not just any competition, not just against white belts, not just against brand new guys, against the absolute best in the world. It's like, people are using that. If it's 80% effective, that's a pretty good move. You know what I mean? Maybe we explore that a little bit. Maybe we make a little innovations to that, but we don't go, let's just go with the new the new wacky submission hold that some dude posted on Instagram, and yeah, we're just gonna focus on that for the next 6 months. And it's like, it seems so silly. Why would we do that? You know? So yeah, I totally agree.
I was living on my coach's living room on a mattress. You know, I ended up like just bouncing at a bar. I'd been a cop. I quit my job. And
Derek Moneyberg presents 10 Commandments of Wealth.
Took the gamble on myself to become a successful professional fighter and make it to the UFC or Pride, and at the time. And
am I making a sacrifice right now, or am I just investing in a better future? So it's easier for me to make those decisions when I think about it as like, oh.
Yeah, absolutely. And now that you mention it, having to actually really process and think about it, I think that word sacrifice is kind of like, I believe it's the word that the ones at the top kind of use to make everyone else feel better about it. Because when you're at the top, now you realize that was an investment.
Was everything just golden and easy and handed to you, or do you have a little struggle yourself along the way?
No. Yeah, in 2013 and 2015, I was living out of my car, full time, and I was too proud to ask for help. Like, how ridiculous is that? You're living out of your car and you think you know it all. And 2015, that's when I kind of I knew that I didn't know it all. So why not find experts in that and really shortcut that? I thought I was going to just chip away. I thought I was just going to read books till I was an expert. I never really talked to anyone that actually did it.
It's been about a week since I've joined the 10 Commandments of Wealth program, and there's so many interviews that are offered in this program. I'm inside the Derek Moneyberg 10 Commandments of Wealth program. This is an awesome program that you're gonna love. I'm gonna use the principles and the knowledge from this program to help me boost my leads in my marketing firm. Buy this program, it's a wonderful investment for your future. You won't regret it, and you'll absolutely love it.